Sir, I have bad news.
What is it, gun?
The world is in danger.
Did somebody say world?
Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, Monster Hunter is an ever-evolving creature of a series, just like the monsters that we hunt. Every game in this series is notably different from the last. Some mechanics stay, some mechanics get left behind, and the general result is that every game in the series is different. As a result, in a way, I miss every Monster Hunter game that isn't the one that I'm playing actively, but at this immediate moment, the one that is really tugging on my heartstrings is one that originally released almost exactly 8 years ago, the first Monster Hunter game that I ever played, Monster Hunter World. Every hunter has their own favorite game in the series, and while it may not always line up with being the first Monster Hunter game that you played, the first one will always hold a very special place in your heart no matter what it is, because there's just something extra unique about discovering Monster Hunter for the first time. Your first time adjusting to the flow of combat and having it all click finally, seeing all the monsters, the environments, and just experiencing the totality of what Monster Hunter is from a blank slate beginning. And every game that you play past that, you start to have these expectations already built up in your mind, you have habits that you've already built from previous games, and you just look at it all through a very different lens compared to someone who is experiencing it as their first game of the series. And Monster Hunter World was the first game that I went through myself. And as someone with a generally quite poor memory, I actually remember my first journey through World quite vividly, and the vast majority of the memories are very fond. So today I want to talk about Monster Hunter World, about how I miss it and I love the game, and how that feeling persists even though Wilds is the active game right now. And to be clear, I'm not trying to bash on Wilds by any means. I adore Wilds, but I also really just miss spending time with World and Iceborne. And that to say, of course the game still exists, I can go play it right now, but there are a number of things that have been changed since then, as like quality of life changes to the game, that make the gameplay loop faster and simpler, which is a good thing at heart, but at the same time, I miss the charm of the way they used to work. A big one on that list is tracking monsters. Before Monster Hunter World, tracking monsters mostly was just like wandering around to zones until you found the monster, or of course, after you had fought them enough, you would just have knowledge of which zones they like to be in. Then you would use a paintball so that you don't lose track of them when they change zones. In World, this system evolved a massive amount, instead resulting in things like footprints, or claw marks, or mucus left behind by a monster that you have to pick up, examine, and then use that to build up like a profile of the creature until your scout flies just lock onto them and know where to find them. And they even made it specifically evolve so that the more research you had done on a monster over time, the faster the tracking process would be in each quest. So while something might take a while to track the first time that you went to fight it, once you got to Endgame, it was much quicker. So it wasn't even really that much of a slowdown after you had gotten it to that point. And by then, you probably had started to memorize where monsters like to be on a map regardless. That to say, it was something that I found really charming about World as my first entry, and it has since been phased out over the last 2 mainline games and replaced by just knowing where a monster is permanently, like you just always know. And I can see why they've done that. It definitely increases the uptime of the hunt, so to say, meaning that it lowers the time that is spent not hitting a monster. But it was also a system that I thought really added a unique charm to Monster Hunter World. The environments were also just so gorgeous, and it's not just about the quality of textures so much as the way that the developers chose to use colors and lighting across the design of the game. It just made the world feel so vibrant and inviting, and I couldn't help but explore at every possible moment. As well, it was just such a satisfying experience going from zero map knowledge, getting lost like every 5 seconds in the ancient forest, to basically a flawless internal navigation system of the map after enough hours spent playing the game. And I have had a version of this feeling in Risebreak, and even despite the auto-pathing Sacred and riding in Wilds, I've also found a lot of enjoyment in the maps as well, but there was just something about that experience in Monster Hunter World specifically that made it feel so much more meaningful to me. And it's entirely possible it's because it was the first time that I did it. The first Monster Hunter game you play, again, just has such a larger impact on you, and you will never approach a newer one the same way as your first one. So I definitely do have some level of nostalgia goggles going on here, but I don't think that's a bad thing either, as long as I can admit it, especially because Monster Hunter World was the first game for the majority of people who play Monster Hunter. It was the biggest boom in game sales and the largest number of new players of any game of the series so far. So while I can't say that I speak for literally everyone, I'm sure there are tons of people who have the same feelings that I do, the nostalgia for it being their first Monster Hunter game and stuff like that too. The characters then were just also incredibly charming. Things like the meowscular chef and his grandmother as the chef in Iceborne as well. I absolutely love them, and while I understand why in Rise and Sunbreak the system was totally different, and in Wilds it's because we aren't properly established in the Forbidden Lands yet, but I hope we get that style of canteen back in some capacity in the expansion for Wilds, because it's just something about a singular feline chef carrying a whole settlement on their back, and World and Iceborne specifically giving them such massive personalities and such incredible cutscenes when they're making the food too, and the fact that I even have fond memories of Meowscular Chef from the movie that we all have collectively agreed wasn't real, and that should say a lot. The characters just have this aura, this vibe that makes you want to exist around them. Even the huntsman who just sits on a stool until a situation is dire enough to warrant his help. I just feel like every character had their own sort of role, their own personality, and while a number of them were very trope based, it also made them easy to relate to and understand and to connect with in a weird way too, while still having some sort of a cartoonish vibe too, with the characters only being known by their titles instead of actual names for the most part as well. And I'm someone who actually enjoyed the handler in this game too. Of course I memed about it because I don't think it counts as bullying if you're bullying a fictional entity and then you can have fun with it, but I think that she was a great hunting companion and she perfectly fit the goofiness that exists within Monster Hunter as a whole, because Monster Hunter is almost as equally silly as it is cool. It is extremely cool, and you can be a ridiculous badass, but you can't really truly be a ridiculous badass without also just being plain ridiculous sometimes. Not to mention that the story just felt really good in this game. It wasn't the most complex narrative by any means, but I loved exploring the world, learning about the world, uncovering its mysteries, and then doing everything we could to protect it, which granted we're doing similar things in Wilds, but with a different sort of causation behind it all, with the Guardians and the fall of Wyveria and everything surrounding that too. Moving on from that to more world-specific things as well, I enjoyed the specific way they did the RNG systems for the endgame quite a bit. The decorations being the chase feels more correct to me than RNG talismans being the chase, as every decoration that rolls well is one very tangible step forward towards your ideal build. We got RNG decorations again in Wilds, but because of the way that the decoration system works in Wilds, it just felt totally different, and for most people they actually finished the decoration grind quite quickly, whereas in World and Iceborne, it took much more gameplay to achieve anywhere close to the same level of complete collection, and I think that's a large part of why they also added in the talisman RNG endgame grind later on in Wilds too, just to give us something to treat as a more proper long-term chase item. That said, I like the way that this worked in World more, and as an extension of that, I really like the way that they treated skills and set bonuses in World as well. It was the first game that evolved to using the modern skill system, where skills had specific levels to them, like 1 to 3, instead of having to reach a threshold to activate them to begin with, like you had to for skills in the older games, and in World and Iceborne, the balance of skills felt quite reasonable to me too. In Rise and Sunbreak, I don't think it was bad, but it got way more complex than the simplicity of builds in World and Iceborne, and in Wilds, we have the whole weapon and armor skill split that makes things quite a bit different too, and to an extent, I just miss the simplicity of the skill system in Monster Hunter World, especially combined with the way that they handled set bonuses in Iceborne especially. Like, I really loved things like the secret skill set bonuses that let you achieve higher than normal ranks of a skill, like having free meal was absolutely hilarious and made for some really effective support build setups too, and there are plenty more things like that in the game as well. Beyond that, the endgame systems, both in the base game and the expansion, were pretty solid too. Base World's endgame was basically you chose from a few tempered monster options if you want to get decorations, or tempered elder dragons specifically for augment stones, and the augment stones led to health augment, which let you heal on every hit that you did, and that led to extremely comfortable hunting in a way that I just really enjoyed, especially as someone new to the series at the time. Health augment was like the security blanket I took with me into battle. It let me feel more confident to play riskier, and playing risky is what often results in the coolest, most memorable moments while hunting. Then in Iceborne, the system expanded with the guiding lands, and while it had some functional issues at the beginning, those were eventually fixed up before they stopped updating the game, and I absolutely adored the living map with all the environment types at the same time with rotating groups of monsters too. It was just such a fun little endgame specific concept that worked really well in my opinion. Then as far as the monsters in the game as well, in my current knowledge as someone who has fought pretty much everything that the series has ever offered in one game or another, I think that Monster Hunter World's roster was actually a bit tame. Where it succeeded was that aside from maybe Great Juros, who I think is a tad forgettable, everything else in the game just has this larger-than-life personality that makes you remember them forever. Even something like Kulu Yaku just has this anxious energy to him that makes me want to just hold him and calm him down and stroke his plumage while I use the distraction to steal his egg. But the fact that even something as silly as Dodo Gama became a pillar of the community, something that nearly every hunter could agree was just the cutest damn thing and must be protected. There may have been a very minimal amount of skeleton variety, like no fanged beasts until Iceborne, no leviathans at all, no crabs, no spiders, none of the funkier monster types, but even working with a roster that was mostly fanged wyverns, flying wyverns, and brute wyverns, they still designed an absolutely incredible roster for the game. And the fact that there were so many brand new monsters too just really added to the awe factor of the game for people who, unlike me, had played prior Monster Hunter games beforehand. That said, a big monster related thing for me that I loved about Monster Hunter World is the monster behavior, and specifically the fact that some monsters were just fully passive around you until you engaged with them. And I think in comparison in Wilds, the only monster that won't attack first is Gravios. Every other thing will either attack you on sight, or just after you standing near them long enough they will get aggravated and attack you anyways, whereas in Monster Hunter World and Iceborne, a bunch of the monsters, including elder dragons, would just completely ignore you until you attack them first. Then of course we need to mention the combat, and I think that was just at a really unique point specifically in base Monster Hunter World, not even Iceborne. I think Iceborne combat was fun, don't get me wrong, but I personally preferred it in the base game of Monster Hunter World before we had the clutch claw and tenderizing and wall bangs, and before the weapons moveset got messed with a bit and added more stuff to them too. I think base World's weapon movesets ran that perfect sort of line of being more refined and much smoother than they had been in previous games in the series, but without going absolutely over the top for the most part, without getting too complex or too flashy, though there were of course some instances of flashiness, and the weapons have generally just had more and more added to them in every iteration since then. And for me personally, I think the fantasy of being a hunter lines up correctly with the movesets that we had in base Monster Hunter World. I think a lot of the stuff that we could do in Rise and Sunbreak and now in Wilds as well is cool as hell. Offsets, for example, are such a badass feeling when it happens, and most weapons have a really fun flashy finisher type attack that feels good to use now. But as far as the immersion of being a hunter, there was just something really special about these specific movesets we had in base Monster Hunter World to me. That just about does it for today then, everyone. I just wanted to take a moment as we are in the early stages of 2026 to go back around 8 years, almost exactly 8 years, and yeah, I know it's crazy it's been that long since the release of Monster Hunter World, but I just wanted to talk about the game that both began my initial love for Monster Hunter as a series, and then fanned the flames and grew that into the full-on passion that I have now. At this point, Monster Hunter is an incredibly major part of my life, and it has been for nearly a third of the years that I have been alive. I love this series, and Monster Hunter World and the Iceborne expansion are what caused it from the beginning. And I love gushing about things that made it happen that way for me. Again, I don't mean to shine like a negative light on any other game in the series by doing this, so much as just pointing out that the particular quirks in World that made it such a special game to me personally. I hope you've all enjoyed this, and let me know the reasons that you love Monster Hunter World and Iceborne in the comments down below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.